think, when people talk about sacrifices, they are risks, but they're also, when you look at it carefully, they are calculated risks. And I never looked at those things or those choices as sacrifices. I always looked at them as opportunities or choices. And I made diligent choices. I would weigh everything up. Once I decided that I was all in, I'd been a fly on the wall. I'd been in multiple high-performance environments, and I knew what it took. I had that experience of being on the other side of the fence. We don't call them sacrifices, but choices. In my mid-20s, when it was all very fun and you're able to go out on weekends and hang out with your friends, buying clothes and shoes and put my money aside and invest into myself and my new career. To not see my family, to not be able to be present when friends are getting married or having babies. Those are the more difficult ones, the relationship and family-oriented ones. To have a European-based life and career, which is part and parcel of being a professional Australian athlete who's competing in a European-based sport. Hi, I'm Rachel Neylan, ex-professional road cyclist, Olympian, silver medalist at the World Championships, physiotherapist, currently studying a Masters of Science in Coaching Psychology, and pivoting from my recent retirement in professional cycling to a portfolio career in consulting, coaching, and all things performance.
Hey, I'm Gillett. And this is the Power of Women podcast. We're a platform that showcases and celebrates the strength, resilience and achievement of women from all walks of life. And it's not every day one has the opportunity to interview a champion. However, today is in fact that day. Infatuated with the quest for optimal physical performance, Rachel Neylan knows the dedication and hard work it takes to be a champion. In this episode, we're going to reveal Rachel's story and, in so doing, endeavour to light your fire, knock on the door to challenge what drives you, and ultimately to inspire you to be the very best version of yourself. Rachel Neylan, welcome to the Power of Women podcast.
Hello, Di. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you for joining. And I can hear the sound of roosters in the background. Where are you?
I am in Lucca, Tuscany. So yes, roosters to wake us up in the morning. We love that. It's just springtime now. So not almost spring. So the sun's streaming in, and we're starting to have some beautiful days here. So yes. What's
the population of Lucca?
It's still a small town, but it's growing rapidly. I think it's only a city of 500,000. Well, the greater provincia of Lucca. But yeah, it's definitely on the map now.
You've been there a while. How long have you been there?
Yeah, I've been in Lucca. I've based in Lucca ever since I started cycling. So since 2010, it's been my European base. So,
beautiful. Yes. And are you fluent in Italian?
Yeah, my Italian's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's not perfect, I would say. I spend a lot of time obviously away and speaking English way too much, but it's a pretty good level now.
So, where to start with interviewing a champion? Because there are so many questions I've got for you today. Perhaps if we could start with pursuing an ambition. When did you fall in love with sport?
That's such a beautiful question, Di. And it's a really easy answer. From as long as I can remember. I was 10 years old, and I remember at that point we didn't actually have a TV. We went through a phase where my parents decided that we didn't need a TV in the house, but for the Olympic Games they always enabled us to sort of rent or borrow or have a TV in the house, and that was something really, really special. We were always allowed to watch the Olympics. So I have this absolute vivid memory of being 10 years old and watching the Barcelona Olympics, and it never left my mind. And all of those incredible Australian performances that I watched there just were etched in my memory for the next years, and I just became obsessed and mesmerised with everything that was about Australian athletes and performing on the world stage. And from then on I was captivated.
So where did the sporting pursuits start? Were you always a cyclist?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I was a very active kid. We had a big backyard, and we grew up climbing trees and running around and doing all those normal things. And when we would go on holidays, there would be, we were never inside. It was always playing in the beach and running around, rollerblading, bike riding, you name it. But when I was 9 years old, my brother's friend invited him to come to Little Athletics at Little Athletics Club, and my mum asked me if I'd like to come along the second week, and after one day I just came home after it and I said, "Oh, Mum, this is what I've been waiting for all of my life." So she always tells me that funny story of how I came back so enthused after one little Saturday morning at Ryde Little Athletics Club. So after that, I stayed there, and I did athletics throughout my whole teenage years until my early 20s, and until I set on a quest to find my, let's say, my optimal physiological match.
Which was?
Well, which was in the end cycling.
Okay, but that wasn't a straight to cycling. Did you compete in athletics in any particular discipline?
Yes. So all throughout my teenage years, I was a hurdler. So I was probably barking up the wrong tree. And back then, there wasn't really that attitude to so much to steer kids in one direction or another. If you loved it and if you were happy, then you just let them go. And this early specialisation thing, it wasn't really a thing, especially in athletics back then in the 80s, in the early 90s. So I was trying to be a hurdler. Naturally, I was good at middle distance when I first started. I was doing 800s and 1500s. And then I just started really enjoying hurdling and the technical aspects, and I was quite flexible so I could get over the hurdles. But then once it required more speed and power, it was just obvious that I just didn't have that innately within my body composition, my structure and my physiology. So I tried to pivot back to doing sort of more longer distance or middle distance in my early 20s, and then that started a bit of a run of injuries, and I was studying at that point, and it just all, it just felt like I was really barking up the wrong tree. And I was a bit disillusioned because I was ready to put my whole life into it, and I wanted it so much, but it was just the wrong sport for me in the end.
Did you come to that realization yourself, or was it put to you by performance coaches that you weren't going to make it?
It was a mix of both. So I had studied, by that point I was 21, I had just graduated after a 4-year degree at Sydney University, a Bachelor of Applied Science, and I was ready to start my physio career. So I was quite educated in physiology, and I'd studied anatomy.
Movement
and I was really, and I started to do some work experience in high performance environments, and at that same time I started dating a rower, and it planted the seed in my mind, perhaps there's a capacity to transfer from one sport to another. And at that time I had started going down to Mosman Rowing Club and started rowing, and it was actually 2005, and it was the year where we lost Amy, and I had never ever been introduced or associated with the world of cycling. Like, I didn't know anything about cycling. And it was that morning where we had the news on the radio, and the whole rowing club were just absolutely shot to pieces with grief because of the news of Amy. And there was something that I can't explain it. There was something that day, that morning, and I can get really emotional now talking about it because I know it's a really big part of my journey, that inspired me right from the beginning. And I then went back and learnt about Amy's story, and everyone was saying how she'd transferred from rowing to cycling, and I thought, wow, that's pretty incredible. And it really, her story and her legacy really planted such a strong seed in my mind. And then it wasn't until 3 years later that I ended up getting the Amy Gillett foundation scholarship, which allowed my launch pad into racing in Europe.
And we probably owe it to the listeners, Rachel. Whilst Rachel and I have not met in person before until today on screen, Rachel is referring to the former Australian cyclist Amy Gillett, and in full declaration, Amy was my sister-in-law, and she was tragically killed when the Australian cycling team was hit by a young female driver in Germany in 2005. So, Rachel, you applied as part of the memory of Amy and in the interest of supporting the girls and turning a tragic accident into something beneficial. The Amy Gillett Foundation was founded by a group, and I was part of that initial board in the early years of the foundation, and there was a scholarship developed for high performance athletes to be a launchpad for their career, and that is the scholarship that you were awarded in what year, Rachel?
It was in 2010.
2010. And was that the launch pad to your cycling career, or had you already made inroads at that stage?
Yeah, so at that stage, I had already made some good inroads. I'd embarked on the cycling adventure, so to speak. But by no means had I won a race or had any results whatsoever. It was just the tip of the iceberg. In 2008. So just to wind back a couple of years after that seed was planted in my mind, after I spoke with a lot of my colleagues in sports science, in high performance, in physiology, I really started to explore that notion of sport transferability and physiological transferability, and really to understand my own body. And it was just that rowing experience that made me realize, look, I'm an endurance athlete. Like, I need to follow this. And I was really just taking to it like a fish in water. But at the same time, my career was developing and progressing, and I got the job as the Australian rowing team physio in 2007. Which caused a bit of a conflict in my own mind and my own soul, because I really, really still wanted just to become a world-class athlete, but I knew that I had this wonderful career opportunity at the same time. So I followed the career opportunity, stayed fit and healthy, and by the time I came back from Europe in 2007 as a physio for the rowing team, it was pre-Olympic year, and they were coming home winning all the races and coming home with quite a lot of medals that year. I really realised that the only difference between these incredible Australian athletes and myself was that they were going all in, and they were going all in on one sport that was physiologically matched to their bodies. From then, I decided, okay, it's really now or never. And I was 25 years old. I was wearing the green and gold tracksuit, but I was on the wrong side of the fence. And from that moment, I said, look, it's now or never. I just really need to make a change. So I this is the funniest piece of the story. I came back from Europe and I did a Google search and I searched women's cycling, Australian women's cycling talent identification. And lo and behold, this was late 2007. Lo and behold, the first Google search result came up: South Australian Institute of Sport, talent identification program, females aged 18 to 25, 18 to 26. So I think I was, just on the
you've got to squeeze in.
I just squeezed in there. Recruiting now. And
recruiting now.
I looked at it and I just applied straight away, and I thought, this is too good to be true. Talk about serendipity, synchronicity, and
one day I decide to do a search and they've got a call out.
But the thing is that they knew that I was a physio because of the high performance, it's all very connected in high performance sport. So I really had to convince them that I was serious about, no, I'm not joking. I actually really want to become this is my dream. I really want to become an athlete. They're like, yeah, just send us your data, And I said, no, I'm going to come to Adelaide.
Because you knew that you were going to just get skimmed over and pushed aside if you didn't do that. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And so I said, no, I'm going to come to Adelaide. I'm going to put myself in the lab like all the other participants and try out for this program. And I did. And it was the best thing that I ever did because I proved to them that I wanted it. I proved to them that I was all in. And then I had to do a second test. So meanwhile, I went back to Munich, did the rowing physio job that I had to do for the World Championships, tried to stay fit, running up and down the hotel stairs, and I went and found a gym in Munich and
This is sounding like high performance training, not. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was, and then I came back from that, went back down to Adelaide, and actually had to do an actual test on a bike, like proper bike. I had no idea how to ride it, and so I took it. I'd bought a very, very basic entry level road bike just as the cross training for rowing. So I had that, but I didn't know how to ride it. Got down there, I had to take it to a bike shop just to take it out of the box. It was hilarious. Had no idea. And but the day before the test, I went there and I did a recon of the place where I was going to have to do the climb in front of the coaches the next day. This is just, so I'm already wearing my skins down to to go down to Adelaide already, wearing compression tights. This is 2007. I'm doing the recon the day before just to get into the talent identification program, just to get a coach, just to get in the door. And then it was just, obviously the pathway, that was only the very beginning. So very funny stories right from the start. But that was the initial
point of entry.
Point of entry, and then 6 weeks later I packed up my apartment in Sydney and moved to Adelaide.
So from there, how long did it take you to get a Guernsey on the Australian team?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
And that was Olympics or Worlds? What was your first gig in the green and gold?
So, yeah, look, it wasn't an easy first few years. Very, very far from it. It was not smooth sailing. Cycling back then was very, very difficult to make that transition from Australia to Europe. It still is difficult, but back then there were not even really any structured national road series teams. It was virtually impossible. So you really had to do your time in Australia, which I did 2008, and then the first little part of 2009, and then I wrote letters to everyone in the US and said, look, I'm a stagiaire, I'm really willing to come over, pay my own flights and do some racing, because I just knew that I had to fast track the experience in the racing. That was really, I knew how to be an athlete. I knew how to train, and I was getting gains. I was getting stronger on the bike, but I just knew I had to fast track the racing. So 2009, I got an opportunity with a small team in the US and went over there and did 3 months of racing, which was the absolute best decision that I made. And then I was able to come to Europe at the end of that year, just for a couple of races, paid my own way again, and just managed to call people and write letters and get onto teams. So it was, I threw everything at it those first years. And then there was, it wasn't simple. There was a lot of crashes, a lot of injuries, a lot of setbacks. And especially in 2010, where I had quite a bad accident on the Stelvio descent and ended up in Innsbruck in hospital with a broken jaw, and then had to get that sort of a medivac flight back home to Australia and do some pretty significant rehab. And then again in 2011 broke my pelvis in the Giro in my first pro team year, which was an adventure in itself, that one. And then it wasn't until 2012 where I was selected for the World Championships with the Australian team, and then was in amazing shape, had an awesome year, lots of racing, and by the end of the year I was just in the best shape of my life. Got into the breakaway and attacked on the final climb and won a silver medal for Australia.
Fantastic. What a fight though to get there. None of that was easy.
It was absolutely a fight, that's for sure.
Yeah. And being outside of the AIS bubble, was that even harder?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change it though, I must say. I wouldn't change it. I think that the hustle, the fight, the struggle, but also the resource building that I had to create in those early years, because I was doing it alone. I was outside of the AIS bubble. I wasn't given a silver spoon. I wasn't taught how to do. I wasn't put in cotton wool. I wasn't told I was great. I was always sourcing things on my own. I was being resourceful. I was talking to people. I was learning. I was seeking out new opportunities, new technology, like new ways to for me to try to fast track and fill the gaps, because I had a lot of gaps to fill, let's be honest. So it really made me the athlete that I am and that I was. And I really believe it helped me to elongate, and it was one of the factors that led me to be able to have such a long career. Yeah.
So if you cast your mind back to the 10-year-old Rachel, did she have that same drive of not taking no for an answer and just going headlong and pursuing your dream?
Yes.
Yeah.
I really believe she did. She 10-year-old me. Look, I think my cycling career was a direct just a direct progression of who I was as a kid. I remember I was 4 years old, and vague memory, but Mum tells me as well, I was standing out the backyard under the good old Hills hoist, and I looked up and I looked up at the blue sky and I said, Mum, like, why am I here? Asking these big questions. And I think, I don't know what her answer was, like, to be honest. I need to ask her again. But, this sort of wide-eyed, why not attitude. And I was always, I think I was always on the back foot, and I just really, I was always, I was born breech, and I was really started a little bit behind. I was skinny, and I was, I didn't, it took me a while to start thriving, I think. And
yeah, but your resilience started early. Your resilience build started early.
I was never really an early high performer. I really had to work for everything. And I think that instilled in me this work ethic that was just bigger and more resilient and more dogged and more determined than most other people. And then once I realised that was a skill, I was able to, both a skill and a personality trait, and then I was able to build on that and say, hey, this is something special, and use that to my advantage throughout my career.
Yeah. So what's been the most significant learnings about you that you've had along the way, if you reflect now?
I think the number one has to be, like I said, the number one has to be my work ethic. I would never have called myself naturally talented. Like, I've been athletic from the word go, but no one ever told me I was great. No one ever said I wasn't winning races when I was young. I didn't even start cycling until I was 25. So my work ethic took me to places where I would never have gone before, and that was just that preparedness to do the hours, to stay focused, and to know when to push and when to pull back, which was a lesson in itself in the early years, I must admit, because when you are prepared to have a big work ethic, it can work against you sometimes. It can be, a bit of a double-edged sword. And the second thing, aside from work ethic, has definitely been my resilience and my ability just to come back after every setback and and your brother, and you know, a lot of people who know me would just say, look, yeah, Rachel's the most, it's the biggest muscle that I have in my body, my resilience.
He mentioned that when I asked him about you. He did mention that. Yeah, he did. And as you and I said before we started recording, getting an accolade from my older brother is quite something in its own right, because he doesn't pass them out very often.
No, he doesn't, but he was also one of the most successful Australian coaches of all time. You have to take that into consideration in isolation, and you know, if you receive an accolade like that from a person who's a high performance coach, it's that's something pretty special. So yes, my resilience is something that I'm known for. It's just a bit of a reputation I have, especially in the recent years, and the ability to elongate my career, especially through various setbacks from injury, but also bad luck with teams folding and so on. And I think the third thing was my ability to really combine the art and the science of training in high performance. So the concept that it's not a polarizing concept. It's not a duality, and the paradox of this art science sort of integration, that, you know, you wake up every morning, for example, and you have to make decisions based on the data and the science and the metrics and what's sort of scientific, and then what you feel. So that's increasingly becoming such a skill for modern day athletes and people, humans in general, as we get more and more data and information of our physiological states. Then we need to be able to integrate that intuition and that sort of the art side, the intuition and that natural feeling about our physiological state, into saying how ready we are to do a particular bout of intensity, or a particular training sort of a training objective for that day, or performance objective for that day in whatever domain that you might be performing in. So that's the third sort of, I guess, strength or
I can see a career out of point 3. There's a whole piece of work to be done in your pivot on point 3 alone.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm really enjoying right now is reflecting on all of those aspects, you know, work ethic, resilience, and you know, the high performance sort of, I don't really like the word mindset. I feel like it's a bit too cliche now. That it's more about, you know, it's really the art and science of high performance, and really unpacking what is high performance, because it's different for everybody. It's not just elite athletes that are high performers. So yeah, it is a really interesting space, and especially since now, you know, I'm finished my professional cycling career and pivoting into working in health technology, sports technology, in doing some consulting work and some performance coaching in those spaces. So yeah, it's really exciting to be able to I guess pick out all the amazing, you know, skills and knowledge bases and parts of expertise that I've developed, both as a physio, as a health professional, and as 15 years as a high performance athlete, and now combining that with the coaching psychology studies that I'm doing at the moment. I'll be finished at the end of this the end of this year. It really provides an amazing you know, triple lens of as to which I'm able to critique or analyze, or, you know, advise or consult in high performance situations, or performance situations in general.
Just winding back, Rachel, when you made that decision, when you were supporting the Australian rowing team as a physio, you had to make a decision at that point to either pursue your professional career or to pursue your own personal athletic ambitions. There's risks in that, and there are certain things that you've had to give up in that. Tell us about those risks and what you've given up.
Look, I think, when people talk about sacrifices, I think, you've worded it right. They are risks, but they're also, when you look at it carefully, they are calculated risks. And I never looked at those things or those choices as sacrifices. I always looked at them as opportunities or choices. And I made diligent choices. I would weigh everything up, but once I decided that I was all in because I really, really appreciated. I had been, I'd been a fly on the wall. I'd been in multiple high performance environments, and I knew what it took. I didn't have I had a very, very accurate perception of what it took because I had that experience of being on the other side of the fence. But the sacrifices, we don't call them sacrifices, but the choices were to move from Sydney to Adelaide. In my mid-20s, when it was all very fun and you're able to go out on weekends and hang out with your friends and to stop buying clothes and shoes and put my money aside and invest into myself and my new career. To not see my family, to not be able to go to be present when friends are getting married or having babies, and those are the more difficult ones, the relationship and family oriented ones. Obviously over the years there's been quite a lot of them. And then the choices to have a European based life and career, which is part and parcel of being a professional Australian athlete who's competing in a European based sport.
Well, coming up, let's talk about what you're doing now and how you're taking all of these learnings and all of these choices that you've made, because as you rightly pointed out, they're not sacrifices, they're choices, and talk about what you're doing next. If you're loving the Power of Women podcast, be sure to jump on to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button to ensure you never miss an episode. So, Rach, back to this next chapter of your life, and I've been following, not stalking, but following you on LinkedIn, and you've done some really, really insightful LinkedIn posts and shared your story, and they've been great reading. So if anybody hasn't come across Rachel Neylan on LinkedIn, I task you with the challenge to connect with her because she's got some great insights and knowledge to share. But you did a social media post not that long ago, and you said in a question, "Who am I beyond being an athlete?" Do you know the answer to that question?
That's a great question.
It's really your question. It's your question.
It's honestly, look, talking about athlete transition, and look, transition for people in all walks of life it's definitely not easy, and especially when you've been doing something for 15 years, you put your whole heart and soul and life into it. It's been definitely a challenging process over the last few months, but also a beautiful process at the same time, in being able to really reflect on actually what I've done. Created a cycling career from scratch, really from nothing, learnt how to ride a bike and ended up racing in Europe for 13 years as a professional, and raced 6 world championships for Australia and an Olympic Games, and fulfilled my childhood dreams. So
yeah, no mean feat.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And when I say it in one sentence, I'm able to really appreciate it a lot more. When you're constantly still in the bubble, even up until last year, comparing myself to how I wanted to finish my career and how I really desperately wanted to have that last, big win and that last dance. That wasn't the case. I finished my career with amazing, some amazing results and palmares that I'm incredibly proud of. But it's also still really hard for any athlete who's been at the top of their game and raced on the world stage to say goodbye. And so the last couple of months I've been going through that transition period, and then just celebrating, doing a lot of reflection, and just taking that time for myself that I think I really needed to close the book and then start to take all of those wonderful things that I've learned and achieved as being an athlete and understand how I can translate them into the next steps of my career, and then start to create my next chapter. But in answer to that, I think, sorry, going back to the question, do I know who I am outside of being an athlete? I think the answer to that is that for me, because this athletic will and prowess and disposition has been so much ingrained in my life since I was 10 years old, like I said, it drove me to become a sports physio. It drove me to become an athlete. And now it's driving me to become a performance consultant and to bring everything and the coaching and consulting together. It's part and parcel of who I am. I don't really see it as separate. Okay, I'm not.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's more of it's so much a part of who I am. This athletic mindset is never going to be it's never going to leave me. It's only going to be manifested in other ways throughout my life. I love sport. I train every day, and I will for the rest of my life because I love it, because it's part of who I am. It's part of how I'm wired. It's just going to look a bit different. But the beauty of that is that all of these, the athletic lessons and the journey, the art and the science of it, is highly transferable into the work that I'm going to do in the next chapter of my life.
And I have spent over 30 years as a executive search specialist, and I have interviewed hundreds and hundreds, it's probably thousands of executives over that span of time. I've always had a bit of a bias for sports people, whatever that sport may be. And more often than not, probably a bias if I'm looking for somebody to fit into a team environment, somebody who's come out of a team sport, because I think there is a different psychology in a single pursuit athlete and to a team athlete, and you would know that better than I. But I think it would be a fair call out to make. But I do think. And I've seen it play out in business, and I've spoken to other former Olympians, including Margot Foster, on the Power of Women podcast. There is a direct correlation between the determination and almost bloody mindedness and to an extent killer instinct of a high performance athlete, transitioning that into being very successful traits as a business person.
Absolutely, and it's not a hunch. The statistics are there, and we're seeing it more and more. So I think there are some fantastic statistics of C-suite women who mostly, I think 75% of C-suite women have been athletes or competitive in sport in some in their lives, either currently or previously. So you're absolutely right. And there's so many parts of the athletic journey that really highly translate into high-performing executive careers. They're demanding, they require incredible work ethic, they require dedication and focus, and they also require the resilience that it takes from athletes, whether it be in corporate or startup or any other domain. I don't see the huge difference between high performers. They're just slightly nuanced, but the foundations of high performance are the same. And when you're able to look at it from a broad lens and more of a system view, then you can really see the ways to translate all of the aspects of high performance, break it down, and then be able to apply that to any other situation, person, team, or organisation who need to improve their performance aspects.
So are you going to go this journey alone as a female entrepreneur, or are you going to consult and work through other organisations, or can you in fact share that? Because I might be asking you to reveal more than you can at this stage.
Look, I'm looking at multiple opportunities at the moment. I've already started doing some consulting with some health tech startups and in the sports tech space as well.
This measuring it to understand it.
Absolutely. And health, especially in personalised health at the moment, that's a really, it's a really fast-moving industry, and it's very exciting, the technology that's being created at the moment. So that's an exciting piece to my portfolio, and then some performance coaching as well. So I'm really interested in how to improve high-performing teams. And then, as my experience grows out, I think I'll progress that a little bit more further. But I really love working one-on-one with individuals, high-performing individuals, corporate, startup founders, and then also elite athletes in longevity coaching as well, or any athletes in longevity coaching. So that's obviously been a skill and a strength of mine, in being able to combine the sports medicine, the physio, the applied science, the high performance expertise. 15 years of being a professional athlete myself, and finishing 2 Tour de France's while being over the age of 40. So that required a little bit of intel about athlete longevity, I won't lie. So look, just really combining all of those things, and then, as I said, adding in this top layer, which is an incredible educational journey that I'm on at the moment, with doing my Masters of Science in Coaching Psychology at Sydney Uni.
Oh, well done. So what is your superpower?
What is my superpower? I think my superpower, honestly, is 2 things. It's being able to connect the dots. I think I have a superpower in being able to connect things, connect people, ideas, and concepts, to see the gaps and to see where things join and connect, whether it's concepts, whether it's ideas, whether it's people, situations, and networks. I look at situations and my brain network is just it's always on, which is difficult, because now I realise I need to really integrate a lot more meditation into my day. Otherwise, I'm just on all the time. But that's a big part of it, the connector. And anyone who knows me knows I do connect people. I take that from my father, actually. My father was a diplomat, so I was able to. I got that from him. I think it's really one of the, without thinking about it as networking, is one of the greatest things that you can do that costs no money, is connect someone else with an idea or a person that they might,
couldn't agree more,
that they might have an advantage from, not an advantage, but it might be value or value adding to their life. I think
as you're speaking and we're talking about tech before, I'm already thinking of somebody in London that I want to introduce you to. So I mean, that's kind of, I totally subscribe to that way of thinking.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's a philosophy that's been ingrained in my psyche for a long time, is this power of connecting people. I think it's really strong. So that's something that is a superpower, and then that lends itself to this wonderful global network that I do have, and I'm really fortunate that crosses the lines between, and now those lines are becoming a bit more blended and blurred and grey. Is this wonderful network I have in the world of health and sport, and that's really merging together right now, which is really, really exciting.
Rach, if I was to ask you a final question, if you were to pay forward all the knowledge and wisdom that you've amassed on this extraordinary journey of resilience and professional pursuits that you've had, what would it be that you would have to pass on to a listener aspiring to get themselves going?
My number one thing, I think, is really to know yourself. Asking who am I and what do I want? And that's a really deep question. It's not an easy question. But when you start from a place of knowing yourself, then everything else flows from that. If you're really, really secure and really understand your why, what is your big why, then the other things flow much easier. For example, if you know why, I knew why I was pursuing this crazy dream of becoming a cyclist. I knew the why, and then all of those bouts of adversity in the first years, I was able to overcome them because I had this very, very strong sense of purpose, and knowing why I was doing it. So I think that's one of the most important things in whatever pursuit that anyone's doing in life or sport or work is know your why.
Thank you. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us from Lucca in Italy today. There's so many key takeaways. I mean, this whole thing is just a bundle of social media affirmations to get somebody going and off the sofa. So thank you. But there was one thing that you said today that really resonates with me that I'd really just like to point out, and that is you said you made choices, not sacrifices. And I think for anybody who's feeling a bit weighed down by what they're doing or decisions that they have to make, or feeling that something's been imposed upon them by somebody else, don't forget we make choices, not sacrifices. Until next time.